keep it a bit shorter today. But there are still a couple of things that do make sense to discuss, and I also have a brief presentation. Don't know whether it makes sense to show it to you, but we can go through it regarding GDPR enforcement. But maybe because it's so fresh, we can start. And since you're on the call, Ted, that's great. And I've missed it. Start with how the IPP Global Privacy Summit was, how it went, and what the I don't know, hot topics and stuff like that was. And I understand there was quite a large group of Waldor Group colleagues there.
We had a very nice lunch arranged by Nancy Perkins, who's local in DC. So there were 8 of us at lunch. So we had lawyers from Brazil, from Korea, from Finland, and from DC and Boston. So it was a really nice event. We talked a lot about what we were working on and that sort of thing, and it was just pleasant to be together. In terms of the conference itself, and by the way, I never would have run into any of these people at the conference. There were, probably 5,500 people there, I'm guessing, from, all over the world. I don't know how many of you have been, but the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, this is their big conference, their big global summit, and they have amazing speakers, really good programming and lots of it. You're, often, unlike most of the other conferences I attend, it's an embarrassment of riches. You're like, well, I like 3 things in this time slot. I've got to pick one. So there were, I don't think I attended any of the GDPR or other foreign, country up to me sessions, because I rely on you all for most of that. I mean, I'm often interested, but as I said, there were so many good options. So there was a lot of programming around AI and the privacy issues around AI. I should also say that this conference is heavily skewed toward privacy. They do another conference that's more skewed toward security. So lots of AI programming, some healthcare, a lot about state privacy laws, including a very good panel involving enforcement agencies from Connecticut, California, Colorado, and Washington State. And they talked about their priorities and their approach to enforcement. And they all claim they're not out, playing gotcha. They are really focused on more visible and concerning lack of compliance by companies that should know better, and companies that collect and process a lot of data. And so that's kind of where their focus is. So I could go on. I mean, it was a packed 2 days of programming, preceded by 2 or 3 days of workshops, which I didn't attend, but one of my partners attended a couple of them on AI. There was a whole day of programming focused on AI. So as you all, I'm sure, are experiencing, everybody wants to talk about AI. So it was a good conference.
Great. And the size, because I mean, I attended last year, and when you mentioned the number of people, it sounds like it was the same size than last year.
Yeah, it was, well, it was interesting because you'll remember the big sort of exhibit hall and, place for main conferences. Well, they basically, there was a false wall at the end, which they got rid of. So it was it was even more massive than last year, but it was hard to tell because there was so much empty space. I'm going to say it was bigger than last year. They must have done that to expand the space. So I think last year I heard there were about 5,000 people. So I'm guessing 5,500 or 6,000. But it was well attended.
And this is always in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, at the Washington Convention Center, which is a massive, facility. So.
And unlike last year, for example, think. It seemed not to have been sold out because that happens with the European conference sometimes because they can't squeeze it into the Brussels venue properly.
Yeah.
But with the Washington Convention Center, it's I think it's more of a challenge to actually
Fill it
sell
up.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's you know, the conference hotel sold out very quickly, but there are a lot of other hotels nearby. And even if you're staying in the conference hotel, it's such a walk to the convention center, even though you don't have to go outside. It's just so spread out. But anyway, it's very convenient to attend as well. If you are able to get there, any of you, I would recommend it. We had a bunch of clients there. We did a little client dinner. There are a lot of, you know, festivities going on for you to meet up with people. And so I met some people just at the conference breakfast or breaks. And then, you know, there were some other events as well, but it's a lot of heavy programming. So unlike other conferences where I go mostly for networking, this one I go for substance. It's good programming. So.
Yeah. And I can only, I mean, I don't know, Gary, Franco, Christina, you may, and hi, by the way.
Hi, sorry for joining late.
Whether you've already been to these conferences, it is really super useful to meet existing clients because very often they bring their privacy teams to that event and use it as a meeting hub thing. But as you said, Ted, without proper planning, you won't meet anyone because it's just too massive. It's like,
You'll never bump into anyone there. Yeah.
We're talking about the IPP in Washington, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've joined it once, but back then I was still with the Austrian Data Protection Authority, and it was just after Austria became chair. So everyone wanted to talk to my boss, and I was there with her. So I went home with like a full stack of cards, like from all companies. I was like, wow, they all want to get in contact with the Austrian DPA all of a sudden. So, but I mean, the former head of the Austrian authority, she was always very cautious about making arrangements with like one-on-one arrangements. So she always made sure if she's talking to someone to talk to a group, and she also made sure at those conferences to, if there is some talking, then always meet with a few people and not just one, because for a regulator this could always end up in troubles or a wrong perceiving of what's actually meant. So
I think when it comes to the Americas, that's their only large event, I guess. I don't know whether there's something specific for South America, but I'm not aware of that. No, okay, so they have that.
There's nothing.
Yeah. And I don't know, Gary, do you know whether there's something for Asia? Because I think there is something. I mean, they try to, I mean, for them it's a product also, but they
Actually, there will be a gathering in Bali, by the end of May. You know, from
okay, but that's World Law Group. Yeah, that's World Law Group. No, so specific for the IPP, because I think I've read something about an Asian summit that they have set up, but they.
Yeah, sorry, I not heard about that.
Yeah.
No, and I wasn't sure about that either. Yeah.
I'm sure, you know, those will catch fire. I mean, when I started going to the IPP, I think there were about 1,800 people there. It was in a totally different facility that could handle 1,800 people. And it just grew over the years. And, you know, there really is a very international crowd there. So I would imagine there's appetite for more local programming in other regions. And they've just been wildly successful.
Just looking at their website briefly, I do see there's an IAPP Asia Privacy Forum in Singapore, July 17th and 18th. And then a New Zealand one, November 26th and 27th. And we already talked about the European one and the security one in the US.
Yeah. And we need to make sure that whenever one of these larger conferences is, that we make sure that the World Law Group folks are connected. But you sent that out, Hannah. I think we just missed to click on it.
Yeah, and I think and Ted and Nancy had also emailed some of the people that they had been in contact at previous year's summits. So it was nice that they were able to get together. But again, these emails go out and I think people forget to click on them or forget to let me know. But I will make sure to add these other ones to my calendar that are more regional to get folks together as well.
Yeah, because it's a nice opportunity.
Mhm.
Yeah. So my next point on the agenda was just to synchronize on upcoming conferences, but that's exactly what we just did. So I think we can take that off the list. What I have prepared is a brief presentation on GDPR enforcement, and I can go into that in a minute. But I think we also want to give or to use the opportunity to just give an update on what happens in your jurisdiction. And even though this is supposed to be focused on EMEA, I think we don't have to do that, and we shouldn't do it. So I'd be very interested to really get a better feeling for what the current trends are, because at least from my European perspective, looking back, the history was that when I started doing privacy and data protection, no one cared, and that was pre-GDPR. And it was the business was around selling it, and specifically in Germany, you had to have a data protection officer. So there was always a very regulated environment. And then obviously GDPR came along, and it was the client business was focused on GDPR projects, and very often some companies looked at privacy in a serious manner for the first time and just dressed it up as a GDPR project. So that was the thing back then. And personally, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you what I think where the market when it comes to privacy and law advice is really heading, because as you said, Ted, right now everyone's talking about AI, and that has privacy aspects, but it's not data protection per se. So, but that may be my European perspective, and I would really like to know what your view on that is, and where you currently think that your privacy related or data protection related business actually is. Just
well, in our case in Argentina, we have a law that has more than 20 years. And last year, the government sent to the National Chamber of Deputies a bill to update this law, obviously following GDPR and other new laws like Brazilian, Ecuador, and other South American laws that are also following the GDPR guidelines. Here in Argentina, we have a new government since last December, and they are dealing with other things. But we hope that this bill will be discussed in the future months, and this will make a great change in our work due to the economic sanctions that are very similar to GDPR, and there are plenty of new obligations for data controllers and data processors. So we have a great expectation on this bill, and also the European Commission in the decision on January that ratified Argentina with an adequate level of protection, also issued Argentina to go further with this bill. So we hope that next month we will have some news regarding this, and our work will also came. I also see this about artificial intelligence. but we don't have a mandatory legal framework about this. We have some guidelines from the government, but no more than that. We also use data protection legal framework to review specific things, or maybe intellectual property. It's all related to that.
Okay, but that sounds like you may actually be still ahead of this. What we experienced with GDPR 5 years ago, where once a new law, a new regime comes into force, then you can actually make the case to clients that, okay, you need to look at privacy in a serious manner, and we have the teams here. So
yes.
okay, well, this is okay. Lucky you.
Thanks.
I don't. Is this something, Gary, in China? Is it something that is actually of concern for clients?
Basically, we have a newly updated protection of state secrets law. Somehow it expanded, the scope of carriers. Normally, refer to like computer, like USB, such kind of devices. To the traditional carriers expanded to human being, because you can access state secret by reviewing some documents, and the government can detain the people access the state secret. But it's not there scaring. In China also the law is very harsh, but enforcement not quite often carried out by government. But we have to say now, the law broaden the scope of the carriers which can contain state secrets. But on the other side, we observe, due to the economic downturn, government try to attract foreign investment. In this kind of situation, make sure the smooth flow of data is the must for foreign investors to do business in China. The headquarters needed to understand what happened in China, and they need to access a lot of databases, databases around the world, or they can concentrate the database, for example, in US or specific European country. So on March 22nd, a new law published which encourage the cross-border data transfer. And now, for example, when we have litigation in overseas, previously, all those documents needed to be that will be produced as evidence should be approved by government before we can transfer to another jurisdiction for the purpose of document production. But now, they shift the burden to the lawyer, ask the lawyer to review whether those documents contain important data, sensitive personal information, or state secrets. So normally we will issue a affirmation or a memo, to support the client to transfer those information to overseas.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, you will see the ultimate owner will be the client. They will be liable if anything wrongfully transferred to overseas. They should bear the liability under Chinese law. But in general, we can see two controversial trends in China. But in general, I think in terms of data transfer, we are a bit optimistic to see ease of control.
Okay, I mean that sounds like a very good, sorry to phrase it like this, business model that with GDPR you can sell the client a program to achieve GDPR compliance once, but if you have to review any information that goes in and goes out, that's it's a gift that keeps giving.
Kind of. But the liability also very severe, right? If we commit some wrongful doing, we definitely even will commit to criminal liability. That's why we are very cautious.
Yeah. Ted, I've just read, I think the other day that there was something about a new data protection, I think, but I have heard that so often that I
Yeah. I would have lost a lot of money betting over the years on whether we were going to have federal legislation on privacy that was across the board as opposed to industry specific. But who knows? This could be the time, I'd be right. So there is a new federal bill that was passed or that has been proposed that seems to have bipartisan support, which is, as you may have read, pretty unusual in our Congress these days. It includes things that I just find it hard to believe will be retained, like preemption of state law. I don't see California going along with a federal bill with preemption. Frankly, I don't see New York going along with a federal bill with preemption. And I'm not sure without those two states, they can really get this done. But that's where it is now. So it has kind of so just to back up, where we've headed is, California decided, oh, well, the EU has something, so we'll do something, but we'll do it differently, which was kind of crazy, but it was actually the original CCPA in California was drafted by an activist, and it looks it. It's a terrible law, just even from a drafting standpoint. They instead of saying, well, the Europeans obviously thought about this, let's use their kinds of terms and concepts. They decided they would take terms in common use like business, consumer, and give them very weird specific definitions that no one would intuit. And then, the rights are basically what the rights are, everywhere. I mean, you can only have so many different flavors of rights in my mind. Maybe I'm not creative enough, but, right to correct, which it wasn't in the original law, but is now. Right to delete, right to know, right to limit certain kinds of processing of sensitive personal information. There is a provision on cross-context behavioral advertising, which again doesn't mean what you would think it means. It's very specific, and it's really dependent on regulations which have not been promulgated yet. So everyone's kind of pulling their hair out on that. So when that all came online, other states started looking at that bill and realizing they had an opportunity to do something, or that statute, realizing they had an opportunity to do something, but also recognizing that it was just a very flawed piece of legislation. So there's a model that was kind of first adopted in Colorado and Connecticut that seems to have kind of gone around the country with some differences, but not really important. So the key is that at this point, for other states, for the most part, you can use one disclosure, and it would not be the same disclosure as you're using in California. But at least there's some commonality, some efficiency, some uniformity there. But now and those statutes continue to roll out. There were 3 last week that were either signed into law or put on the governor's desk in various states. So we're, running fast to keep up with all of those. But again, fortunately, nobody's sort of gone off piste like California did, and they all look very similar and have similar kinds of requirements. In terms of the gift that keeps on giving, they all require risk assessments that be updated. They, that sort of thing. So there is a bit of that. It's not, a one and done kind of project for companies. So we're doing a lot of work around disclosures, around vendor management, because you've got to push down all these requirements to your service providers. Lots of, due diligence and M&A, and that sort of thing. And again, the federal bill looks like it kind of follows the model that has rolled out among the states, an informal model, I'll say, with the same kinds of rights and requirements and so forth. Nothing too earth-shaking, other than, I would say, preemption. And there's also a limited private right of action, which is not in the other state laws, other than California, which seems to intend to provide a private right of action in the case of a data breach. But the way it's worded in California, I would expect plaintiffs' lawyers will push on that and try and expand it to, any unauthorized use of data, but we'll see. So that's kind of the lay of the land, I think, in the US right now on the privacy side. And then on the security side, our firm has a very robust insurance practice, and lots of the clients, and I grew up kind of in that practice as a lawyer. And so lots of the clients we advise are in the insurance industry, and there are lots of, cybersecurity requirements there. And New York kind of drives the discussion because so many big insurance companies and producers and others are licensed in New York. And New York just amended pretty substantially their cybersecurity regulation that applies to all financial services other than securities, which is regulated differently in New York. So banking, insurance, all of that stuff. And so they, among other things, changed the annual certification requirement to require that you not only certify compliance every year by the CISO, but now the CEO, the highest ranking executive officer, it says, of the company needs to sign the annual certification. So unsurprisingly, where last year CISOs were happy to say, yeah, we're in material compliance to the best of my knowledge, now they're having to kind of explain things to the CEO, and we're getting lots of questions about, oh, we realized we actually didn't meet this requirement. And, so there's now a mechanism to file an acknowledgement that these are the only places we're out of compliance, and here's our timeline and plan for fixing it. So lots of activity around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all I mean, to be not very surprising, right? In the end, it's all about whether clients care or not, is all about liability and potential penalties.
Yeah.
And maybe just wait a minute, can I share this?
While you're doing that, I just realized I'm using my World Law Group mug from Atlanta for Miller Martin, and I'll send Joe a note reminding him that I'm still thinking of him and that I'm advertising conference calls.
I'm not really sure.
At the very bottom, you should see a share screen. It's in green.
Oh, build share. Oh, okay, crap. Oh, yeah. Of course. So let me just. Oh no. I hate this sharing view because it really gives me the entire.
You can pick anything to share.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It's just it gives me. I have two screens, and it then shows the presentation that is on two screens, and I don't see you anymore. That's what I'm concerned about. But
if you go up to the top, you can exit full screen mode, and then you should be able to see us.
Yeah, you should see the presentation now. I just wanted to.
We do. It's just not in presentation mode.
Presentation mode, right?
Yep.
I feel like one of my 70-year-old partners. This is unbelievable.
I think you need to choose.
That looks
Perfect.
good, doesn't it? So that's not that old yet. Sorry. I have to get you back here on this one. All right. So just be careful not to be too jumpy when changing slides, because now it works with my mouse. I mean, from what I just said, it's all about, oh, come on. It's all about enforcement and fines. And that's when people in Europe, or when companies in Europe, clients started to care, when GDPR turned out to be expensive. And what we did back then, I have to switch off my mouse. I don't know why it keeps moving it. What we did back then was to, oh, is someone else going through the slides? Because I don't know why it changes it, but it doesn't matter. So we started to collect fines, and that was it was fairly easy in the beginning because there were no GDPR fines, right? There were a lot of data protection fines from local legislation, but not from GDPR. And it seems to move from itself. I don't know what else to do. So I have to shuffle you around. And we started then this enforcement tracker thing, which is a website. It's actually called enforcementtracker.com. And all the European GDPR fines that are being published, and that's not all of them. So I don't know. I'm not doing anything, and I'm now feeling like the 60-year-old partner again.
Hey,
so,
careful.
no, sorry, I said 70 in the beginning. We collected that. Again, not all of the data protection authorities publish them in the same way, so there's a reporting gap to some point, but everything that is available we have collected, and you can research it. It's not very heavily branded, so it's interesting to look it up, because very often clients want to know, so what's the risk, what could happen, how expensive can it be, and the best way to know is just to see what others did already and how big the fine was. And every year, once a year on the GDPR anniversary, we just look at the data and then see how it progressed and how it developed. And now it's the 6th year, and that means that you can see a trend. So it's all very interesting data. And again, not very surprising, but in the beginning, there was nothing. It was almost nothing. Authorities needed to familiarize themselves with the law. And there was also effectively a kind of a grace period. And that ended after 2-3 years. And then there was more and more fines handed down. And I can show you, don't have to go through the same. If you just look at just at the figures, you can see that this is the total sum of fines that were reported by all of the data protection authorities. And as I just said, there wasn't much for the first 3 years. And then the first massive fines came in, Amazon and now Meta, and that really pushed it up. And so the total amount of fines that, again, what is being reported is now close to 5 billion euros. And that is something that makes clients want to listen. And so in all jurisdictions where a new law modeled on GDPR or similar comes into effect, I think the focus on fines is very important in terms of how serious clients want to be taking it. And it's again, it's a bit unfortunate that not all data protection authorities publish everything. It's just not required in Europe. Some countries still do. But from looking at other jurisdictions outside of Europe, we could see that there's a tendency to have higher fines. But I still think that Europe is, at least to date, the most expensive regulatory framework when it comes to potentially not meeting GDPR requirements. And from this regulatory perspective, I just wonder, I mean, what could happen? I mean, right now, Ted, in the US, there have been sanctions, but I mean, naturally, probably not on. I don't know do you know off the top of your head what, for example, I don't know, COPPA or something like that really turn out in terms of fines?
So most of the enforcement in the US has been around data breaches, and there have been fines related to breaches. Outside of breaches, just kind of straight, privacy violations, I don't think we've seen quite as much because these laws are relatively new. And because, as they claimed at the IAPP, the enforcement agencies are not looking to, catch companies and punish them. They're really looking for compliance. So I expect that will ratchet up, but on the privacy side, we just haven't seen much. If you go to industries that have had privacy requirements, and again, as you probably know, in the US, the issue of privacy has really been focused on industry sectors. So healthcare, financial services have had privacy requirements for a very long time. That's what brought me into this space, is the clients I was doing other regulatory work for and M&A work for, started asking questions back in 1999 about, these privacy notices they had to get out all of a sudden, and it just kind of grew from there. So they have had issues with privacy, including, misdirected information, protected health information showing through windows on envelopes, things like that have resulted in some enforcement. But if you look at enforcement in the US, it's really mostly been around data breaches. And that's kind of easy, right? You're going to them, you're telling them what happened, and then it's easy for them to say, oh, we should look at this and take action. But that's kind of, I think, where it would be in the US. So if you look at the fines by sector here, and these are, again, these are EU numbers.
These are EU numbers. And it's just, I mean, this is driven mainly by a few massive fines, namely Amazon and Meta, because I mean, these are industries that do work with data, where it's a very important part of the business model. And where there's a lot of money that can be made, and so the fines are high as well. So
I would say I'm sorry, the one thing that I should correct is that we have had, massive issues with some of the big tech companies. I mean, the Facebooks, the Googles, they have paid some big fines on privacy issues. That's for certain, but I don't do a lot of work in that space, so I guess I didn't think of it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to raise awareness about the fact that if you want to look up some of EU data, you can do so on the website, and it's fairly easy to pull off that data, and has also source to links to where we've got the information from. So that may come in handy when you have to advise a client on what the risk in Europe is. And we also put this together in the report, but that will come out in May. So we're still working on that. And that brings me to another topic that I just wanted to briefly touch on, because we as a group, we have two, I think, dormant projects, I want to call them. We do have, we did publish a data breach guide, which was very successful back then, and worked on an update. Before that, we had a whistleblower guide. It was a massive amount of work to put this together, because it's mainly about coordination. And by now, I think both are outdated. That's fair to say. And I just wanted to briefly raise the question of whether we want to do either push for another update of the breach guide, whether that's worthwhile, or whether at some point makes sense to think about, for all the other jurisdictions, to maybe also collect fines when there are new laws out, because it's fairly easy to do so. It may not even involve much work, because it may be available in your jurisdiction from the authority, if there is an authority, but it doesn't mean that it is readily available for clients on this aggregate global basis. We don't need to decide this now, but I just wanted to mention the idea, so that you can think about whether it is something that we should or could entertain at some point. In the end, it all depends on whether we have sufficient data to put together a meaningful source of information. So for Europe, we would already have everything, but if we want to make this into a global report or something like that, it would require other jurisdictions as well, of course.
Yeah, Christian, and I was just looking, I'll have to find that link to the data breach guide that currently is updated with Europe. The compliance group has started work on a whistleblower guide. We haven't published it or anything. Those leaders sent me their sort of draft proposal. So what I'll do is I'll send it to you and Ted and Esco to take a look at and see if there's anything we might want to add into that guide. And maybe we could do just sort of one guide from the combination of groups. But I will find the link to the data breach guide and circulate that around for folks to take a look at. But I do think it would make sense, you know, and we could accept these on a rolling submission and update them as they come in. You know, the way we post them on the website now, it's not one PDF, it's a link to each individual country. So we could easily do that as people have time to update it.
Yeah, and I think it's a very significant difference to how we had to do it earlier, because if you have to put everything together and have it ready at one point,
yep,
it's a gigantic undertaking.
Yeah.
And if we can update it piece by piece, that's it's a lot better. Just one question: is the compliance group aware of this age-old group whistleblower?
Yeah,
piece,
I
so
had
that they
sent
know?
them that before they put their draft together. I had sent them the old. It's not on our website anymore because it's so outdated.
Yeah,
It's there.
old.
It's just it's archived. So I had sent them that in the past. So why don't we, before we publish that, the idea was that we would get a couple of examples for members to use so that they could see what we're anticipating in responses, and then open it up to the rest of the jurisdictions to contribute.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Since we're closing to the full hour, I don't know, is there anything else that anyone wants to share from or ask from your jurisdiction, or in general, or what the group can do or shouldn't do? Because if not, then my question would be, when is our next call? Do we already have a date?
Let me take a look. I don't want to say we do. I don't believe we do, but the next one should focus on the Americas if we're going in that rotation.
So I've just given you a bit of an update on the Americas, but there's a lot to report here, so that would be fine. And I know we'll get, decent participation and people contributing.
Yeah, and we could do that. I think we could hold off on scheduling that until the fall. May is just kind of a challenging month with
I agree.
Regional and with Summit. So maybe we take a look at the fall to schedule that, and then we can do sort of an all hands meeting at the end of the year.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we manage to avoid school vacations and stuff, I think we'll get
it's challenging with being a global organization.
Yeah, of course.
Dates always don't work for somebody, right?
Right. Great.
We may know more about that federal legislation too by then. We will know more, something more, one way or the other.
Hey, Nancy, I didn't see you were on.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have access to my video right now, but
okay.
So that would be a surprise to see a federal legislation, but let's see, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
All right. So if there's nothing else for now, then I think we can and should leave it there.
And for anyone who is interested, we do have our colleagues from CMS Austria presenting an update on the EU AI Act next week. Let me just take a quick peek at my browser is doing circles right now, but I believe it's on the 16th. Yeah,
Yes.
April 16th. So it's at 10 a.m. for me. So what hour are we coming up on for you, Christian? Is it
10?
So it's 10 New York time. So is it 2 o'clock there for you?
No, it should be 4.
4, okay.
If it's New York, it should be 6 hours time difference.
And I'll drop that into the chat so that you guys have access to that. But that's just a half-hour update. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come with those questions, or if you want to share what's going on in your jurisdiction, we'll have half an hour after for anyone to do so. But I've just dropped that into the chat.
Great.
And
okay.
Johannes Juronic is presenting that.
Great.
All right.
All right. So,
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hannah, for hosting it.
Good to see everyone. Nancy,
good to see you.
again, I don't know when you joined, but I reported a little bit on IEPP, and again, thank you for making the arrangements. It was a really nice lunch.
it was really great to get together with everyone. I'm glad those of you who could make it did. And Christian, we missed you, but next time.
You're right. It just makes me feel even worse that I've missed out on this one, but I'll definitely be there next year.
Excellent. All right.